Hello, LibertyCon 33. We are in conversation with Seanan McGuire, our wonderful Masters of Ceremonies this year.
I'm plural.
So if you, for all of those who are following us here, if you'd like to ask her questions, please leave those in our Discord channel. But I will start out with, Seanan, if you'd like to say a little bit about yourself and how did you start writing? Is this something you've done all your life, as a child, or something that came a little bit later?
Okay, so rather than saying anything about myself, because I figure at this point you already kind of know, I'm going to explain what an in-conversation is and how it differs from a Q&A. Specifically, this is effectively a Q&A under a different name. I will answer any questions you ask me. And what that means is I will answer any questions you ask me. I had someone come to one of these things, and in an effort to prove that I was lying when I said I would answer any questions I was asked me how many yeast infections I had had in my life. Now, the answer you receive may not be the one you wanted. He didn't get a number. He got a 10-minute lecture on systemic misogyny. So if you don't want to trigger that, don't ask me personal questions you wouldn't ask your mama. I will answer everything honestly. That does mean that if you ask specific questions about my work or about things like what's it like to work with Lucasfilm or whatever, you may get told spoilers. I'm under NDA. I can't discuss that, whatever. But I will not lie to you. I will also say a lot of swears. I am not a G-rated program, and that is part of why we tend to put this event a little bit later in the day. So if you have a small child in the room and you don't want them to hear cuss words, now would be a fabulous time to encourage them to go to a different room and do a thing that is not sitting here listening to a weird West Coast blonde woman swear at the top of her lungs. So I started writing because I found out it was an option. The actual beginning was when I was about 3. I was getting these horrible headaches, just absolute barn burner headaches. And my mom took me to my doctor and asked what the hell is wrong with my kid. And the doctor talked to me, looked at it, said there's nothing physically wrong. She's just frustrated and stressing herself into headaches at the age of 3. Why is this happening? Because she does not have the manual dexterity to accomplish what she wants to accomplish. I've watched her trying to write things down on a piece of paper and not succeeding because her hands literally can't do it. You need to make it easier for her to write. And so my mother bought me a typewriter that weighed more than I did. It was one of those big semi-manual electrics that plugged into the wall, but still was made of solid freaking iron. You could kill a man if you hit them with this thing. Keystrokes sounded like gunshots, and I would sit there typing whenever I thought was appropriate. If you've ever dealt with 3-year-olds, you understand that they are not yet humans. They are people, but they are not yet human people. And their logic is not like our Earth logic. So I thought 2 a.m. in the morning was the best time to practice my typing. You'd be sound asleep, and suddenly there was a machine gun war going on in the small child's bedroom. So that's when I started writing, when I started seriously trying to tell stories rather than writing about my day, or here is a 3-year-old's idea of an essay about her cat. I was about, is someone trying to dig their way through the door? What are you doing? The fun and joy of the virtual convention, cats. When I was about 9, there was a show on the USA Network, which you may or may not remember, which is a basic cable channel, that called Ray Bradbury Presents. And every episode began with a title sequence that ended with this older gentleman sitting at a typewriter, pulling a sheet of paper out of the typewriter and tossing it into the air, that it would drift down and form part of the logo. And one day I turned to my grandmother in that state of high dudgeon that only 9-year-old girls can achieve and asked who the hell that old dude was and why they were using up 30 seconds of precious story time to show me his face. And she said, well, that's Ray Bradbury. He wrote all these stories. I had genuinely, prior to that moment, never considered that someone had to write stories before I could read them. I thought they were like lunchboxes. They just grew on trees in Oz. The idea that any single person could be trusted with the weight and magnitude and importance of telling a story was just absolutely appalling to me. So I started trying to do it immediately, because that's what you should do when you're appalled. Do you want to be Mittens? Is that your goal here? Because I will make you into Mittens.
All of them.
For the whole family.
So our first chat question has come in. In your opinion, is there any part of the creation process that you still hang up on?
It depends on how you define creation process. I hate, absolutely hate first pass editorial because half the time the editor feels like what I have given them is not what I promised them. And I think I've given them exactly what I promised them. And it's that attempt to figure out whether or not you're both saying the same thing. You know, it's a little bit like being from the West Coast and going to the South or to the East Coast of America. You're still in the same country. You all speak the same language. You're supposed to have the same culture. You don't. You've got 90% overlap. And then the 10% that you don't know is there is just completely baffling to you because you're thinking, well, this is America. We're all the same. You're not. The little ways in which you're not are frequently the most frustrating of all. This is my Diet Dr. Pepper bottle. I'm a Diet Dr. Pepper drinker. When I ask for a Diet Dr. Pepper, what I mean is a Diet Dr. Pepper, not a Diet Pepsi, not a Diet Coke, not a Diet Pop. I want what I asked for. And finding out that that is not necessarily what I'll get in a lot of the country was really jarring for me. So going through that cultural conflict with an editor on something that I created is really annoying. It's important, it's essential, you must be edited, but that doesn't make it fun. You do have to ask questions because otherwise I will eventually just start talking about whatever I want to talk about. And that is very likely to be the heat wave we are currently experiencing in Seattle, which is hell, or My Little Pony collection. As choices go, those are not necessarily the most gripping.
So, a little interesting, definitely. And I'm hoping this heat wave will pass quickly. So as a writer, how do you do character development?
I don't. I literally just meet them and start writing about them. I mean, I am the worst writer to ask process questions of because I don't think I have a process. I sit down, I type, a story comes out the other end. So much of it is done on a subconscious and practice level rather than any sort of intellectual or intentional level that it's very difficult to be like, oh, how do I develop this character? Well, I make some decisions. Is this character, what is this character's gender? What is this character's race? What is this character's religion? You know, that sort of thing. I will know those things and they inform who they are as a person. But the little things just sort of come in through development of the character. They show up or they don't. And if they don't, then I genuinely don't know. We've been having a fun explosion over on Twitter recently where a bunch of fans decided to start harassing an author because she would not tell them the astrological sign of one of her characters. And I'm just sitting here going, you know, if I know, I will happily tell you. But a lot of the time, I genuinely don't know. If you can't figure it out from reading the book, it's because I never had to figure it out. So I don't know. What do you think their astrological sign is? I don't give a fuck. If it mattered, I would have cared enough to put it in the book.
Yeah.
William Joseph Roberts, presumably from chat, but possibly from William Joseph Roberts, asks, what has been the most challenging project that you've worked on? Challenging is such a versatile word. You know, what does it mean? Rosemary and Rue, which is the first October Day book and my first book ever, took me 10 years to write because I had no idea how to write a book. And I was basically teaching myself how to write a novel by writing a novel, which is not the world's best plan. So I would say that book had challenges that none of the others had, just because it came from such a place of no preconceived notions, no preconceived skills. In terms of did it stress me out, how much thought did I have to put into it? Weirdly, probably the Alien young adult book that I wrote is Mira Grant, Alien Echo. Alien, the first movie, is literally the first movie I can remember seeing as a human. Again, when I was 3 years old, it was a very eventful year for me. My uncle decided that what he should show to the toddler was Alien with Sigourney Weaver. I was not allowed to finish the movie, but I vividly remember certain parts of it. So that franchise has been a part of my life and a part of my passion basically as long as I have been me. I would argue that the experiences you have as an infant and a toddler are happening to a different person in terms of continuity of personality. Continuity of experience, absolutely. Everything that's happened to the body has happened to you. But because you, qua you, are still so squishy and unformed, you don't have a personality, you don't have opinions, you don't know what you want, you don't know what you like. And it's the things that you get offered in those early years that are really going to shape who you mature into being and who what you obsess over, what you latch onto, what you're into. I think it's part of why nostalgia is such a powerful force in humans. And so Alien has been with me even since before Doctor Who and My Little Pony. And I usually refer to those as my first franchises. So being asked to write a tie-in novel for the Alien franchise was a huge deal for me. It's just huge. And then they announced it, and I got to enjoy reader reaction. Not a word had been written. There was nothing to actually criticize. Nothing existed to have a critical response. But quite a few people were like, oh my God, a YA alien novel. Well, this franchise is dead. Seanan McGuire has murdered it by touching it. I'm like, if I have a death touch, there are some people I would like to go shake hands with. Come on. Chill the fuck out. They did not, in fact, chill the fuck out. So I went into that book not only with the enormous weight of my own experiences with the franchise, but with the awareness that if I completely failed at what I was trying to do, I was probably locking other women out of the Alien franchise for at least a decade. I was almost certainly shutting down any chance of more young adult Alien material. And 12 is the golden age of horror. Young adult is a great age for horror franchises because the things you see when you're 12, that's what scares you, scars you, and stays with you for life.
Yep.
And the cats are destroying things behind me. I can hear them. A chat comment, don't tease. Please discuss your My Little Pony collection. Oh, you have opened a dangerous and terrible. I am not sure you actually meant to do that. I am standing up with my computer. Which is very, very warm because, again, heat wave. We're having a good time here in Seattle. I will now walk down this hallway of my house into a room. This is the My Little Pony room. Basically, 98% of what is in this room is Generation 1 My Little Ponies. I am, as you can probably guess from that, a huge collector of Generation 1 My Little Ponies. I have over 3,000 of them, ranging from the basic pony styles to the flutter ponies, the sea ponies, just everything. They're all up in here. Turn around there and you can see the sea ponies in their shells up on the top. And then there's more ponies behind me. There's ponies everywhere. There is no surface in this room that does not have at least one pony on it. I would normally say that wasn't dominated by ponies, but there's a card table keeping me from getting all the way into the room right now that is dominated by my dice collection, because dice are the other thing that I have far too many of. Dice and My Little Ponies. So Generation 1 My Little Pony, which was created by Bonnie Zachary. She was the only female toy designer working at either Hasbro or Mattel at that time. Was my true first franchise, and the thing that really brought me into what would become a lifelong love of fandom. They are just little plastic horses, but they were one of the first franchises that left room for children to fully project themselves into. And I have almost all of the play sets. I'm still working on collecting all of the plastic horses. I literally have a My Little Pony budget month on month. And my therapist told me to buy more My Little Ponies because they are good for my mental health.
Whatever makes you happy. I'm now I've got to look up this ones with the seashells. I've never seen those.
Yeah, those are sea ponies. There were 2 years of them, 2 waves, and they were bath toys. So unfortunately, they are a little bit horrifically expensive. Don't look up all of them. I don't want anybody to try and figure out how much money I've spent on ponies. I try not to figure that out. It's 20 years of collecting.
We all have something, right?
Yep.
All right. So another question is, um, do you find it difficult to separate out the writing styles where you write series under Mira Grant versus Seanan McGuire?
Not remotely. I mean, every project is its own thing. Do you find it difficult to go from the way that you would talk to people at a LibertyCon meeting to the way that you would talk to people at work? You know the language of the situation you're in. I know the language of the situation I'm in. Right now, I'm working on the third of the Up and Under books, which are published under the pseudonym A. Deborah Baker. And those are sort of a ethereal blend of Lewis Carroll and Ella Baum. You know, I'm very much in that turn of the century children's literature verbiage. And so there, I just go, let's do poetry. We're writing a 40,000 poem and it's good to go. When I'm doing Mira, I'm being very scientific. I will use words in a complexity of language that Sean and Asphodel don't have access to. And when I'm writing for Seanan, I am writing for a much more commercial audience. I'm kind of writing for the everyman. And there, I just keep in mind that my mother's going to read these books and ask myself if she could understand that sentence structure.
That makes a lot of sense. So do you have a particular time of day or particular days that you like to write, like with your rhythm?
I get out of bed in the morning. I go to my keyboard. I start working. I keep going until I have made word count. I stop. I go to bed. And that is pretty much my everyday. I have a minimum word count per day. If I can exceed that word count, I can start buying myself free days in the future. So if I do 1.5, the number of words required for 2 days in a row, I can take day 3 off. I usually won't. I prefer to finish early over having time off, but it is how I'm able to write as much as I do, and it works for me.
So what advice would you give to young authors who are just entering into the field for urban fantasy or really any of the science fiction fantasy genres?
Don't be an asshole. Like, that is one of the big ones, honestly, because we have a whole minefield today that we didn't have even 10 years ago, which is the sheer ubiquity of social media. I see a lot of people going, I want to get my start, I want to be a writer, and they hop online and they realize that controversy gets engagement. So they go straight for, this Brandy lady, I'm just going to attack her for everything she's ever done, and then people will know who I am. Yeah, but now what people know is that you're a jerk and they don't want to work with you. And there are situations where maybe the thing that Bob over here is attacking Brandy for is something I don't agree with. That's reasonable. And maybe I will publicly side with Bob because, again, Brandy ate a puppy. I am absolutely anti-puppy eating, whatever. I'm still not going to pick Bob for a future project because now I know that he will, without any attempt at working things out quietly, go for people in public when he disagrees with them. So, mind yourself on social media. Be aware that you are talking to the world. I have shown my ass on the internet before. I think everyone has. But at the same time, I wanted to work for Marvel. Writing the X-Men has been my lifelong career goal. So even as I would beg Marvel to hire me on Twitter, talk about how much I wanted to write for Marvel, and was unhappy with certain decisions they were making, I didn't criticize Marvel on Twitter. And that may seem like a gag order, but no one told me I had to keep my mouth shut. I just paid attention to who got hired and who didn't. So don't attack the people that you want to have be your peers. Do feel free to speak up if something is really wrong. I'm not saying forgive racism, forgive sexism, forgive religious discrimination. I'm saying don't go looking for trouble. You are only working with and against yourself in the beginning. You need to find good work habits. It can be incredibly easy to fall into the trap of saying, oh, well, I was tired and so I didn't. That's cool. We're all tired. I am having an unreasonable heat wave here in Seattle. It is literally a historic high temperature. I have been asleep for the majority of the last 2 days because my body is just not equipped for this. I cannot handle the heat. I'm still writing. I'm still making word count because you don't have a choice. I'm not saying hurt yourself or you must write every single day. I'm saying you have to decide what you're going to prioritize. And you will, at some stage, have to decide what you're willing to give up. When I still worked in a day job, I chose writing and conventions over career advancement. And that was before I knew whether I would succeed as a writer and actually be able to do this full time, or whether I was throwing away the present for a future that wouldn't materialize. You know, maybe you want to do a lot of cons. Congrats, you can't have a dog. Not unless you have a spouse who will be staying home while you go to conventions and are willing to surrender primary ownership of said dog to your spouse. The dog is going to like them better because they're the one that always does the walking and the midnight peeing and the feeding. You know, if you want to write at the pace that I write, you probably should consider whether or not you want to have kids. Children are a huge time commitment and priority. And if you're going to resent them for taking you away from your books, then maybe that's not the choice for you. But everything becomes priorities and everything becomes choices. So just think really hard about whether this is what you want. Do you want to watch everything you say on Twitter for the rest of time, knowing you will never get it right because our understanding of what is and is not appropriate changes day to day? Do you want to own 6 dogs and never leave your house? Do you want to have 23 children? Whatever. If these are things you desire, you need to prioritize your life accordingly. In the chat, we have Dave W. What does writing under different names give you? More publication slots. You know, Stephen King, when he became Richard Bachman, said that trying to work in traditional publishing was like being an endlessly horny teenage boy with a girlfriend who only wanted to put out once a year. And that is not as inaccurate. Like, that is still the best comparison I found. It's not as inaccurate as you want it to be. I write on average 2 more books per year than we are able to find publication slots for. And in my most plentiful year, I had 7 books out. You know, it is, if you want to get onto bookstore shelves through a traditional publication medium, you kind of need to be more than one person. Also, and as science fiction fans, we have a weird superiority complex. The whole fans are slans thing has been there since long before I came around. It'll probably be there long after I'm gone. But as genre fans, we don't like to think of ourselves as having preconceived notions or having prejudices. That is so incorrect. Readers will not follow a writer from genre to genre until that writer is someone that they are really attached to. Basically, until you hit the point of, oh, I buy everything Terry Pratchett writes, I buy everything Stephen King writes, you cannot be sure that your readers will follow you from urban fantasy to biomedical science fiction thriller, to give a completely random example. Hey, there's no way to guarantee that, because what's going to happen is they're going to know that you're an urban fantasy author. They're going to see your zombie apocalypse novel. They're going to connect the fact that an urban fantasy author wrote that with the fact that it's a zombie apocalypse novel and decide that it can't be a very good zombie apocalypse, because what does an urban fantasy author know about a zombie apocalypse? And that is not fair to your book. That's not fair to you. It's not fair to anyone involved. And it's human. It's how we work. It's marketing. It's the reason that Disney opened Touchstone Pictures in the 90s. It was straight up so no one would ever utter the sentence, Walt Disney presents Reservoir Dogs. They just wanted to avoid that. So being different people gives me more creative space to play in. It lets me be more flexible. It lets me do things in different places. And it lets me make different promises. You know, I can promise that in an A. Deborah Baker book, there will never be a sexual situation, because those books are aimed at 8 to 11-year-olds. And she is a full-on fictional person. She's not just a pseudonym. She's a fictional character from my book Middle Game, who somehow got a publishing contract. It is the most meta bullshit I've ever achieved. But in that universe, Asphodel only wrote the Up and Under series. So even if those had been stratospherically popular, I had become the new Stephanie Meyer as A. Deborah Baker, whatever, I would finish the Up and Under and retire that pseudonym, because the fictional reality from which she comes says she only writes those 4 books. So I can tell you for certain that you will never find graphic sex in an A. Deborah Baker book. I can't tell you that about a Seanan McGuire book. They're not super graphic because I'm not comfortable writing erotica, but I have different promises for my adult work. William Joseph Roberts says, what are your favorite dice and why? Okay, so my actual favorite dice in the whole world are a set of red-orange kind of fireball-y dice with gold glitter inside, made by Firebolt Dice, which is a small dice maker, that she made based on a picture of my primary Dungeons and Dragons sorcerer, Kelpie. So the name of the dice set is Kelpie. They were made for my PC, and they are the best dice in the entire world. My second favorite set of dice was made by a dice maker named Becca, who releases her stuff under the name Evergreen Burrow. She's in Georgia. And they are from her set called Scrolly Rollies, which are dice with strips of books embedded inside the resin. It's clear resin, so you can still see the text on the strips of books. And she made that set from an arc of Middle Game that I sent her. So I own a set of dice that has an actual piece of the advanced reader copy of one of my books inside. And as a dice nerd, that is possibly the coolest thing that will ever happen.
That's pretty dang cool. I cannot say.
Yep. Last year, I told the internet that if I did not win a Hugo Award, I would be sad. And if you want me to not be sad, you should send me dice because I am happy when I receive dice. And the internet sent me about 150 sets of dice. It was great. I would rather have had the Hugo. Not gonna lie about that. But I really liked the part where for over a week, every day's mail had at least 2 sets of dice in it. It was the best week ever.
You know, I think that's one thing about fandom. People are generous.
Yep.
And, you know, and creative. So yeah, I love dice, and I tend to like shiny dice and glittery dice. So I don't know. It's a thing.
Me too. Nope, me too. Most of my dice are either shiny, glittery, or somehow otherwise uniquely cool. Like yesterday, I bought some new dice from a shop called Cozy Gamer. They're out here on the West Coast. And they had a set of hollow metal dice where every die is made up of intertwining krakens. So it's just krakens holding tentacles, and then you've got the number on the tentacles, and the head is kind of the rounded corner of the die. They're so cool. They're not glittery or sparkly at all. They're kind of bronzy, but they are so neat. I couldn't not buy them. They had to be mine.
You have to have them. Mm-hmm. You know, when you know, you know.
Yep.
So but from the last panel, a lot of the chatting afterwards, people were very fascinated about your education in folklore. So obviously that has influenced your writing, but sort of what led you down that path?
I really liked fairy tales. You know, I was answering a question on the Discord real quick. I really like fairy tales. I really like folk music. My Aunt Marnie was in a band when I was a kid, and I became fascinated with the structure of story and how things fit together. And folklore is really the sound of fiction enduring. You know, a folk tale, a fairy tale, a marchen, whatever you want to call it, is a story that we have repeated culturally to each other again and again and again, to the point that it has become an echo that cannot be erased. And I found the notion of the monomyth and the hero's journey and just the way all of these things lace together to be absolutely freaking fascinating. So when I found out it was a degree I could go for, I went for it. It turned out to be a really good thing, since I was actually a dual major in folklore and herpetology. And after getting bitten by too many venomous reptiles, I developed a sensitivity to rattlesnake antivenom and had to drop herpetology. So folklore became my fallback. It was a good time. It was an excuse to basically collect variations of the Tam Lin ballad, 4 years. Over in Discord, Perry Helion has asked, what is your target word count for a day? We're back to social media is a double-edged sword. I don't give a hard number, ever. And it sounds really arrogant when I say that, but it's not meant to be arrogant. You will see so much on social media, especially in younger and aspiring writers and people who are trying to get started, of, well, you know, I saw this person say that if you don't write every day, you're not a writer. If you don't write 500 words every day, you're not a writer. If you don't do this, you're not a writer. If you don't do that, you're not a writer. If you write, you're a writer. One of my favorite books of all time is a book called Mermaid's Song by a woman named Alida Van Gores. It is basically an eco-thriller with mermaids that's kind of Watership Down-esque. It was the only book she ever wrote. She was the wife of the U.S. ambassador to Switzerland, and she got this in her head and decided to tell this story. Wrote the book, published the book, said, I'm done. I told my story. I'm finished. She was a writer. If you write every other day, 100 words a day, you'll still have a novel at the end of 2 years. And what happened back when I was telling people what my daily word count was I was seeing those aspiring writers, those people that I desperately do not want to do harm to, saying, well, Seanan McGuire writes X many words per day. So if you want to be successful, you have to write at least X words per day. I didn't write X words per day yesterday. I'm a failure. And that upsets me, like, viscerally. I don't want to be the rock you hit yourself with, ever, under any circumstances. So I don't give my daily word count target because it's not realistic for most people. I'm a full-time author with no children and cats. I own my home. I still pay a mortgage, but my writing pretty much pays my bills. This is all I have to do is sit down and write. And I have been doing this every day, sitting down and writing every day for 10 years now. I am the authorial equivalent of an Olympic athlete. I am in the best shape of my life. Hey, it's all downhill from here. And so saying, hey, if you can't keep up with me, you're not doing enough, is unfair and uncharitable in a way that I am just not willing to be. I choose kindness. William Joseph Roberts says, Dave W. says, what is your favorite character and why? My favorite character, honestly, is probably Emma Frost from X-Men. I love the fact that she is a bitch. I love the fact that she is a female character who is allowed to not focus on being likable, that she is allowed to have her own needs and opinions. And yes, she gets written by person after person after person. Dozens and dozens of people have had a hand in sculpting her. But what has come out is this incredibly complex, fascinating, interesting woman. And in a large way, comic books, DC, Marvel, any of those, are kind of our modern folklore. They are an oral tradition. They are being told by many hands. You've always got someone else coming along and saying, no, that's not how it went. It went this other way. And we just have to listen and roll with it. William Joseph Roberts also says 20 minutes, 3 minutes ago. So we have 17 minutes left. You do have to ask questions, or God only knows what I'll start talking about. I can see that Brandy is somewhat concerned that y'all are going to let me go off.
No, because I really am. I'm just like, the whole panel was made seeing the My Little Pony room. I love that.
Yay!
I love that. Like, this is like the best panel. I adore that.
Yeah, I went a little bit feral on a library event a couple weeks ago. The moderator left the room for 5 minutes, and when they came back, we were in the pony room, and I'm like, here, look at these, look at these, look at these. So, that was fun for everyone.
I think that's, none of us are single faceted, and I just think that's what makes people interesting. Yep. So you have a love of horror, I believe. I think I remember that. So what is your favorite iconic monster and why?
My favorite iconic monster is probably Audrey 2, just because there is no logical way she became such an iconic monster. She didn't do it. The movie that she came out of to begin with, Little Shop of Horrors, the original black and white, is awful. It is terrible. There is nothing about that movie that has any redeeming value whatsoever, including the plant design, which is how Menken and Ashman were able to pick up the rights to make it into a musical so incredibly cheaply. They paid almost nothing to license Little Shop of Horrors as a story. What makes two Broadway composers at the height of their power decide that their next big hit should be a Roger Corman movie? No one knows, including, I think, them. They tried for more than a year to break into that show to figure out how you tell Little Shop of Horrors as a musical story. And they literally hit the point of saying it can't be done. There is not going to be a musical. We have bitten off more than we can chew. It's time to eat the licensing fee and move on. And that night, Ashman was driving home from basically their funeral meeting for Little Shop, where they put it to bed and said, we're not going to do this. And he turned on NPR, and they were having a retrospective on doo-wop acts of the 1950s. And he turned the car around and drove right back to Alan Menken's house, got out of the car and ran up to the door and said, I know how we're going to do Little Shop. I know how we're going to do Little Shop. And Menken was like, no, we're not doing Little Shop. That is how we're doing it. Is we're not doing it. He says, no, Shang-a-lang chang, something really strange should be happening. Feel the Sturm und Drang in the air, and just started right in on doing it as this doo-wop gospel almost musical. And that changed everything, knowing not only that it was a Broadway musical, but the style of the music and the feeling they were trying to invoke built everything from the ground up. It just suddenly they had a show. And so they put together this musical show about a giant plant from space that straight up just fucking eats people. It's just here to eat people. That's its entire goal. And they do this show, and it should not have succeeded. It was an off-Broadway show that should never have been able to have any legs at all, any staying power at all. And it became a huge hit. It moved to Broadway. They got a musical movie with Rick Moranis and Ellen Greene, who originated off-Broadway. And that movie came out in a very formative point in my life. I was 8. I watched Little Shop of Horrors at least once a day, every day for an entire year. It is still one of my favorite musicals of all time. Rick Moranis will never be surpassed as Seymour, ever, ever, ever. And in 2019, shortly before the world locked down, I got to fulfill a lifelong dream and see Little Shop of Horrors off Broadway in New York. It is the single show I have been in the most times. I have played every female role in that show except for Audrey. And when I say every female role, I include Audrey too. I want to find a Trousers production where they reverse the genders and play Seymour at some point. That is now the life goal. I just want to be Seymour.
That's a good goal.
Yeah. Glitter Monster says, is there a particular musical genre that you listen to when you write? Yes, everything. My iTunes contains at current approximately 23 days of music, and it is just on random shuffle all the time forever. So mostly what I'm listening to is Broadway shows and the Counting Crows, because those are the majority of what is in iTunes when you really look at it. But I listen to a lot of folk music, a lot of modern country. I really love Taylor Swift. I think that Evermore was a superior album to Folklore, at least in part because of the song No Body, No Crime. And I don't understand why Folklore gets all the conversation. And Taylor recorded a whole second album in quarantine and dropped it on us with no warning. And we just pretend that that's not the most impressive bullshit anyone has ever pulled off. Like, my God, I can't get a book out without people knowing about it. And I'm no Taylor Swift. The idea of being able to manage everyone so quietly that your entire fucking album drops as a surprise is just like respect. Go team. Panic at the Disco. I've recently discovered The Amazing Devil, which is actually the guy who played Jaskier in The Witcher and his partner out of England. And their album, The Horror and the Wild, is just magnificent. So I listen to basically everything. My particular musical genre is yes.
Very nice. Okay, so I have another screen here, and do you ever face periods of burnout? What keeps you excited to continue telling stories?
I was homeless a lot as a child. I know that listening to the things that we've talked about today, it sounds like I had a really blissful childhood. I did not. I was well below the poverty line in California. I ate out of dumpsters. I got the church cheese. I still can't stand the taste of real butter because we would get a block of butter at the start of the month from the church charity box. And the only way to get it soft enough that it wouldn't shred our bread was to basically leave it on the counter. And it would just go rancid and attract flies and cockroaches. And so picking the bugs out of the butter before you used it was pretty common. For me, margarine is the taste of being wealthy enough to afford food. And because I am a full-time writer, I have managed to completely entangle mentally my ability to pay the power bill and the mortgage and buy food with writing. So there is a very strong drive, basically connected to I don't want to live under a bridge ever again, to get up in the morning and keep going. And that keeps me extremely motivated. In terms of periods of burnout, I don't know that you can recognize burnout before you're in it. I think I may be going through a mild period of burnout right now because, like everyone else, I lost complete track of time in 2020. 2020, time ceased to have any meaning, it ceased to exist, it just ate the world. And so I reached the beginning of 2021 with a lot more words due than I could reasonably write in the time I had. And so I did not tell anyone I was doing this. Everyone who loves me was very angry when they found out. But for the first quarter of 2021, I did double word count every single day. I took 3 days off in 3 months, and those were the days for my primary D&D game, because I lose my goddamn mind if I don't play Dungeons and Dragons. And otherwise, I was doing literally a double work day every single day. And right now, having caught up and in a position where my brain can afford to take a little time off, I'm actually having trouble making word count every day for the first time in a couple of years. So I think I'm currently in a place of mild burnout. And I have had a couple unplanned days off where I just couldn't get off the couch. Like I'm just gonna lay here and watch Law and Order SVU for the next 6 hours. That is all I want out of life. So I think we're currently in a mild burnout period. I am recovering. I will be fine. Nothing is going to be overdue. I will not have to live under the bridge. I'm checking the Discord, and there are no other questions there right now. So we're all good.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Good. I think Law and Order SVU is actually the most optimistic show on television, which is kind of ridiculous. But it posits a world where there is one rape per week in a metro area the size of Manhattan. The police always believe you. The police always care. And while the police may not always win, they will always do their best to support and redeem the victim. It's the most show on television.
I can definitely see that. So I know you've done a lot of these. What are some of your favorite questions that people ask you in conversations like this?
I mean, it's really hard doing virtually because I'm used to being able to see the room and like how people are engaging with my answers. Am I being too flippant? Am I not being flippant enough? I feel my way through it. I like the ones where someone goes, I heard you were Mira Grant. Is that true? And it's like some revelation. That's always great. You get to watch somebody go through the stages of grief. They try to figure it out. I had somebody in Dublin, Ireland, when I was the guest of honor at Shamrock, ask about a statement I had made about a year previous on Twitter about suicidal ideation. And that particular in conversation actually ran in flesh space about 2 hours over time, because we wound up having, as a collective group, and we did give people an opportunity to tap out. Like this can be traumatic for some people. If you need to leave, that's okay. But the rest of us sat there and just kept talking about supporting your friends and mental health, and that it is not always a failure to wind up in the dark place as long as you are willing to reach out and look for help while you're down there. And that was a really powerful conversation that I don't think could be recreated. I like, again, this is something that feels completely natural on a stage and doesn't feel completely natural sitting in an office chair in my guest bedroom. But I like the questions that give me an excuse to burst into song, because that always makes people happy. And I like to sing, so everybody winds up, in a decent situation. I like when people ask me about my cats, because I like my cats. That's why I have them, because they're good cats. On the whole, this has been yes. William Joseph Roberts says 5 minutes. We're not staring at a clock all the time, forever. We are aware of the time. We promise we will go away in 5 minutes. But, basically, as long as people are asking questions they sincerely want to have answered, I'm happy. The main reason I bring up that yeast infection question as proof that I will answer anything but also make sure you want the answer, is not because this person asked, it's because they asked disingenuously. You know, we have a lot of questions about physicality and sexuality and all of these things as a community that are hard to have answered. And if this were someone that had come in going, sincerely, I need to know that my body is being normal, I would not use that as my example of an inappropriate question, even if it were the exact same wording. So, really, all questions are good questions as long as they come from a place of I actually want this answer.
Well, and a place of community, not just of being a jerk.
Exactly. Like, things can look like trolling that are completely sincere depending on the context and the situation and who's talking to who. So, you know, that is an important thing. I don't like it when people ask me about specific upcoming events in books, both because I can't answer for things like spoilers, and because occasionally I will have someone go, I really like Series X, but I am a person of type Y, and you have never had any people of type Y in Series X, and I would like Series X to include someone who looks like me. Can you promise me that there will be someone who looks like me in Series X? And the answer is sometimes yes and no at the very same time. Like, if you ask that question about the October Day books, the next two that you can't read yet are already finished and at my publisher. One of them is an ARC form, meaning it is functionally published. The other isn't quite that far along, but I no longer have the authorial authority to rip it to pieces and rewrite it to add a new character. So even if I said to you, yes, Brandy, I will absolutely add an electrician to the October Day series to represent you, I promise you this character, you would not be able to see them in a book until 2024 at the absolute earliest. And if you want them to be a recurring character, you need to wait until I can fit them in naturally. You need to trust that once you've told me this is something you want, I will remember it. And if it doesn't happen until 2026 or 27, that's because this way you have more chances of that character showing up in multiple books. So I've had people ask me that question and then get actively angry at me when the electrician didn't show up in the 2022 book. Well, the 2022 book is already finished. And the 2021 book is an ARC, and I don't know what you want from me. I cannot control the universe. No matter how much I try, they just won't let me.
I know. I keep trying myself, and it just doesn't work out for me.
So yay, more. Genuine says, what is the name of the book you said is your favorite about mermaids and the author's only work? It's not my absolute favorite, but it is one of my favorites. It's called Mermaid's Song. And I will also type that answer on the Discord. Dave asks, will we see you at LibertyCon when it becomes a real in-person con next year? I believe that is the intention.
I hope so.
Yeah, I'm intending to. I like Chattanooga. It's a nice place. I'm real sorry to have missed Brood X. I was really looking forward to getting out to the East Coast this year so that I could see them. I know they're not primary in the LibertyCon area, but you have at least a couple, which is more than we have here in Seattle. And then the last question that I had pop in here, speaking of your cats, for me, my cats interrupting me actually can help my creative flow. Is your cat friending life part of your writing process? My cats don't help my flow because they frequently want my attention for far longer than I have to give it to them, but they help my mental health, they help my sanity, and that helps my work. And then the last comment we have is from William Joseph Roberts saying, wrap up. So this is us wrapping up. I'm Seanan McGuire. I'm currently in Seattle, Washington, where it is 99 degrees, which is an unreasonable number of degrees for it to be in Seattle, Washington, and is the reason I've been getting progressively shinier and shinier over the course of this panel. There is no place in my house that is not smolderingly hot right now. I am in hell. I am being punished for someone else's sins. That is Brandy, who has been lovely and facilitated us not setting anything on fire. We are the virtual LibertyCon. I hope you're all having a wonderful time. I hope that you are, patronizing. I can never remember, is it patronizing or patronizing? One of them means talking down to you, and the other one means giving you money. I hope you are giving money to the various vendors and people in Authors Alley, the convention charity auction, and the convention itself, because people like you and donations like ours are what enable wonderful events like LibertyCon to continue happening in the future. It is now 3:50. 6:50 p.m. for those of you on the East Coast, and that means we have to leave, or else William Joseph Roberts will come to my house and kill me with a brick.